College of Commerce, pursuing my BCom. I will be joining the Harvard Business School batch this fall, obviously subject to coronavirus and how that pans out. But yeah, that's a quick introduction.
Thank you, Arnav. That was very helpful, and that's a great set of achievements. So, congratulations for that. So, guys, today's session is on banking, finance, and overseas MBA applications, as Arunav just mentioned. So, let's just start. So, Arunav, you took finance as a career option post college. So, why don't you share with our listeners that when at SRCC you have options like chartered accountancy, consulting, etc. Why did you go ahead with finance and banking in particular?
Sure. I think I was lucky to have a very strong role model in my childhood, who was my father. He had been in the finance space right from the beginning, and hence my inclination towards the finance space came from there as well. Another good thing was that at SRCC there were a lot of good opportunities that were there in the finance space, so I naturally felt inclined to try something there. Specifically, the reason I chose investment banking, I think there are two industries which I felt offered a very steep learning curve right out of college, where you got to work on different sectors as well as on a number of transactions, which were both consulting and investment banking. And investment banking is what I chose basis my inclination towards finance.
Sure, that's very helpful. Just one thing, me myself being a BCom graduate, I generally get the question of why not CA. So what was your thinking about not going for CA particularly?
Sure. No, I think with SRCC, the unfortunate piece is you cannot pursue your CA in parallel to doing the course. So for that reason, I didn't really think of CA as an option. The second thing is, in the finance space, the most important piece is to try and get a foot in the door. For some, that is possible with just a BCom honors. For some, it's with a CA. For some, it's engineering plus CFA. There's no one route. For me, the reason why I chose not to do CA was because there were good placement opportunities at SRCC to enter the space even without a CA. But I have a number of friends who went to a number of different colleges and chose different routes to get in. So many of them actually chose CA as an entry point and got into investment banking after that.
Yeah, I think that's true, because even I am a BCom grad and didn't choose CA because I thought that there are a number of other options that even if you're interested in finance, you can get into without being a CA. So CA is of course a very strong degree to have, but it's not like the most important if you want to get into the finance field. So now getting on to investment banking particularly. So investment banking is, I don't know if you know, a dream job for many students. So if you have to sum up the recruitment process for on-campus IBs in brief, how would you do that? And if you have to give some guidance to the students preparing for their IB interviews, how should they go about preparing for them?
Sure. So I think assuming most of the people on the call are graduates or currently in college, I think investment banking firms, the first thing to understand is that these are very small teams. They usually recruit not more than 2 to 3 people per annum. So there's a huge supply shortage and a very large demand. That's number one. The second thing to understand is there are multiple offices that you can work for. You have a back office, a mid office, and a front office. Front office roles are usually reserved for post-MBA candidates, but there are a few organizations that have started offering it for undergrads. Most of the people join investment banking in mid-office and back office. Here you have a combination of on-campus placements as well as actually reaching out to some senior personnel off campus. I've actually found that a lot of people have managed to secure jobs off campus by just speaking to senior management in the teams through LinkedIn, and that's worked successfully for many people where they've been able to secure interviews. With respect to on-campus placements, should I be giving specific guidance on how you should prepare for it? Like, what aspect would you want me to cover?
So, from what I understand, my personal experience as well, IB interviews, if not at the on campus stage, later in life, they can be a bit technical. So, what would be your advice on for students if they want to prepare for the technical aspect of investment banking? And obviously, the HR part is also there. So, if you could just cover it very briefly, because it's the small team part that you mentioned. So, in small teams, the culture fit also plays a very important role. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there are two parts to it. One is, of course, core technicals, where investment banks would definitely want you to have an understanding of the three statements of any company. So your P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow. I think you need to understand that very well. You will be asked simple questions which will not test you directly on your theoretical knowledge, but they will ask you questions to test your conceptual knowledge. For example, they will say that if I increase depreciation by 10 rupees in the P&L, can you tell me all the entries in the P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow, and how the entire statement will balance? Questions like that. You will also have GD discussions and GD rounds where they will generally test how you fit and how you articulate yourself. So I think understanding three statement accounting, your three statements, and understanding basic valuation is very important. If you have some experience, although it's not necessary, in investing some of your own money, that's always an added bonus. And whatever work you would have done in college as part of, say, a finance society, all of those things always add. The black box that comes in this process is really the fit aspect of the interview, because these teams are so ensure that the people they hire are a correct fit for the firm in terms of their attitude, and unfortunately that's something you just cannot control. So my only suggestion there would be just be honest, show you have the right attitude and you're willing to put in the hard work.
Definitely agreed, because investment banking is a tough job, so you should be ready to put in the hard work. Talking about that, how was your 2-year experience at Citibank? Was it that grueling as people think, or you managed it pretty well?
No, I think without a doubt, investment banking is quite a grind. It's a tough lifestyle, because typically you spend 12 to 14 hours per day, including on weekends, just working. What's important to understand about investment banking, and when I speak about investment banking, I mean specifically the advisory business, which was what I was a part of, which is your M&A transaction advisory, advising on equity capital markets, like how to IPO a company, how to sell shares on the market in blocks. These are all volume-based businesses. So the way a firm is successful is only by churning more and more volume, doing more and more deals, and you have a very small team. So you're almost continuously working on fresh transactions, continuously working on pitching, continuously working on execution. So it's a hard lifestyle without a doubt. And I think that's something you should be prepared for.
So I think switching gears a bit.
Yeah, I just want to quickly answer one question asked by somebody which I just saw. Yes, my role at Citibank was front end. Sorry, Achita, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying, let's switch gears from banking to your move into private equity. So was it a planned move? Had you always thought of moving into private equity post banking, or you just, after 2 years you thought, let's do private equity now? And how did you prepare for those pre-interviews, especially ones like KKR, which are global firms? So what would you advise people if they're sitting for such global pre-interviews?
Sure. I think, to be very honest, when I got into investment banking when I was in my final year of college, I had no idea what private equity was. I just understood that there was an investing space that existed, but I did not understand nuances of the space. I think through the work that I did at Citi, I got familiarized with a lot of private equity firms, and I actually got to work with a few firms and with a few people in such firms, and that's really what motivated me to try and apply for a private equity role. I think similar from the application process for private equity roles, what's interesting to note for private equity roles is they usually hire people with a little bit of experience. So they very often do not come for campus placements. And the sole reason for that is, again, private equity firms operate with very small teams. You need to be performing and providing high operating leverage to the business. So they typically like to pick up people from consulting or from investment banking backgrounds who have the core skills like modeling, making pitches, understanding data. I think so. They pick up people like that with about 1 to 2 years of experience. The way they usually reach out to people in these fields is one, either through headhunters of the like of Michael Page, EAL, Veto advisors. There are a number of headhunters out in the space which directly pick up your profiles from LinkedIn and recommend your profile for an interview. So it's extremely important that you have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, mentioning clearly your company, what your role is, and some description of the kind of work you do, so that recruiters can, pick up snippets from there and recommend your application. The other way, of course, is through your own connects or through LinkedIn, where you can just reach out, cold message people in the space. I've had a lot of people who've messaged me as well, who've thereafter gotten interviews with KKR. So definitely reach out on LinkedIn, and I think these are the two best ways to try and secure a role. In terms of really what it takes, again, private equity firms are have very small teams. They typically hire not more than 1 to 2 people every year, and they usually look at investment banking and consulting. What I've seen that we usually like when we hire people into such firms is definitely your fundamentals have to be absolutely strong. You need to understand finance 101, and you'll be grilled a lot on that. The second thing that you should ideally have is at least the experience of having worked on one transaction where you own the model, you were able to, interact with senior management of the business, with some potential investors. That's highly valued at such firms. And the last is obviously your attitude and your ability to take on more responsibility.
Arunav, you touched a bit on the skills that are necessary for people in the banking and PE space. If you could just elaborate a little on that. And I think just on that lines, we have one question from the audience that says, can you spend some time on what specifically during your city days helped you prepare for the PE space?
Sure. So in terms of the skill sets that you need, I want to divide it into two parts. One is the skill sets that you need for actually getting into an investment banking firm or into a private equity firm. And the second is the skill sets you need to actually be successful within a firm, like a IB or a PE firm. I think what you need to get in, as I mentioned earlier as well, is for an investment bank, at least a fundamental understanding of the P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, understanding of valuation, an ability to articulate yourself, and just, hopefully you're a right fit for the firm. When it comes to interviewing for a private equity firm, I think it's one level above that. It needs to be more than just a fundamental, but a strong understanding of the concepts, which will allow you to tweak assumptions, understand what different numbers mean. If your working capital changes, what does it mean? If your revenue numbers change, margins change, what does that mean? How does that affect cash flow? So one level deeper into your understanding of finance, some transaction experience is always valued. Your ability to articulate yourself and also your ability to, I'd say, debate is very important, because you need to be, a lot of private equity business is all about negotiation, your ability to understand and put across your point of view. So being assertive, having the ability to debate is extremely critical. And the last thing is obviously the fit. Moving to the second part, which is what it actually takes to be successful within working for such a firm. Number one is 100% hard work. The kind of lifestyle that you live, the kind of hours that you have to put in is typically high intensity throughout the day. So hard work is 100% number one. The second part is going to be your attitude, because when you're working such long hours, you want to keep a positive attitude. You want to be taking on more responsibility. You want to be having great relationships within the firm. You want to be building your network outside the firm. So the second part is attitude. And the third part is, I'd say, definitely you need to have a level of mental aptitude, which would enable you to pick up the skill sets as you move along, whether it's with respect to modeling, whether it's with respect to understanding basic finance, or one level beyond that. I think these three things are really what it takes. And Rachita, happy to hear your view as well, given you have worked in the space for some time.
Sure. So so definitely what you said holds true, because as you said, private equity teams are very small. So one thing which I would like to emphasize on is the culture fit, because your lower level of interviews would largely be around case studies, modeling, and all that. But as you interview with the directors and the MD of the team, they largely look for whether you are a right fit for the team or not, and what kind of a person are you. So even if you're well versed with the P&L, financial statements, your valuation aspects and all, but you're not able to depict who you are as a person, you're not able to depict that you are hardworking, that you will be able to learn things on the job, it's very difficult to land up a PE role. So I think you need to be on your feet always, especially in a PE job, because as Arunav mentioned, it's very high intensity. So you need to have a calm mind and at the same time learn things quickly while on the job. So yeah. Okay, so I don't know, should we move to the MBA applications now? Because I think we should wrap up the discussion at around 10-15 minutes and then move to the questions that are being posted in the chat box.
Sure.
So, why did you decide to do MBA at this particular stage of life?
Sure. I think the decision to do an MBA was something which came up every year. So it's not like suddenly I woke up and said that I want to do an MBA this year. It's something I debated at the last year in my final year of college, where I was thinking, should I directly apply for an MBA and try and crack one of the top B schools in India, and maybe that would help as a good launch pad. I think at that point in time, I was quite clear that I want some work experience and I want to understand what space I'm actually interested in, to know whether I want to continue in this space over the long run. And in my view, an MBA served as a great reset button if you don't like the work that you're doing. So that's the reason why I decided I'm going to try and get a good placement, hopefully in an investment bank. If that works out, I'll work for a few years. Otherwise, I will try for an MBA the following year. Once I was done with a couple of years in Citibank, the question again came on, now should I go and try for an MBA? Should I do it within India? Should I do it outside India? And what I felt was there were a lot of opportunities coming at that point in time for the private equity firms. May I request anybody not speaking to go on mute, please? Yeah, so at that point in time, headhunters were reaching out, and a lot of private equity firms, from what I could see and what I discussed with a lot of people in IIMs, was that there are not a lot of PE firms that actually come for recruitment. They typically like to recruit people with 1 or 2 years of experience post an IIM. So what I thought was, if I'm getting the opportunity right now, let me kind of go there and see, whether I can land something without an MBA. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity. For me, again, the question then came, do I apply for B school after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of being at KKR? I think I decided in my mind that I at least want to spend 3 years in this firm, because for an investing role, unlike in banking, which is just about doing transactions, investing, to really understand the role, you have to live through a life cycle of investments, which is actually doing a transaction, seeing it live through and being able to exit, which will give you the real perspective you need before you can move on and share your experiences and learn from others. So that was the decision I took to take it after 3 years. And what really helped me make the decision to go and apply for an MBA abroad was there were actually a lot of people in my firm who had done their MBA from abroad. And I could see, the massive benefit of the network that they had built, which was essentially a very global network. And a lot of the skill sets that they had learned in terms of leadership, in terms of, maintaining a network, because in these type of firms, it's easy to come in contact with a lot of people. You meet a lot of people, but it's not easy to maintain relations and maintain a network. At the same time, I'd also seen the benefit that a university like SRCC would give you in terms of its network. A simple example is this platform, which was started by Harry, who is another alumnus of SRCC, and a lot of the speakers on this platform have been SRCC alumni. So the biggest pull factor was the network, the community, and the fact that it would be global and not Indian, which drove the decision to apply for a B school abroad. And post 3 years, it felt like the right time because I had gotten to see an investment cycle where we did a lot of deals. We saw a down cycle with the whole NBFC crisis which happened, and now with the COVID crisis. So that's really the thought process.
Thank you for sharing your thought process, Arunav. I'm sure there are a lot of students online who would be thinking about whether to go for MBA right after college or whether to work for a few years or apply in India or apply abroad. So I'm sure this would help them structure their thoughts to a certain extent. Now, for the benefit of our users, I've seen some questions coming into what is the process of applying to the Harvard Business School. So in very brief, if you could mention the aspects of an overseas MBA application, and maybe then stress a little on the important parts of each aspect.
Sure. So for an overseas application, for an overseas MBA application, I will speak specifically only for applications to the States. I do not apply to any other geography like UK, Australia, nowhere. And within the States as well, I apply to only a few select colleges. So I think the first aspect of any B school application is the GMAT, where the GMAT, in my view, is almost like an eliminating factor in terms of your ability to apply for B school, right? Because until you've gotten the GMAT out of the way, you will always be stressed about the GMAT. You wouldn't know whether you'll be able to make the deadline for round 1, for round 2, for this year, for next year. So what's really important is that you try and get the GMAT out of the way, so that you can, with a clear head, think about the right time for you to apply. Maybe you don't apply the same year that you've cleared the GMAT, but the next year when you have to take that decision, the GMAT will not be a big hurdle for you when applying. In terms of actually the GMAT preparation, the way I think about it is, at least I approach it in two buckets. The first part is actually the understanding the conceptual, just getting some conceptual clarity on the various parts of the exam, and just being able to practice sums without having to refer to your notes, and just being clear on really what are the different segments of the exam. So that was really one part of it. And the second part of it was, acclimatizing yourself to the actual format of the exam, which is, number of questions that you have to attempt in a crunch space of time. Unlike the CAT, you have to complete a question before you move to the next, and whether you solve it correctly or incorrectly determines how the next question, the difficulty of the next question. So I think that these were the two distinct parts in my mind. I think it will take different amount of time for different people to kind of come off the curve on each part, but I would definitely recommend just cementing in the conceptual clarity, being done with it, and then just moving into practicing as much as you can. What worked really well for me was, 1 week before the exam, I gave a full mock seriously for 3 hours every day, so that I was used to the format, and when I actually sat down to give the exam, I wasn't stressed out about the process, because I was very familiar with the format. That's the first part, really, about GMAT. The second part is about the essay and about your online application. So different schools have a different number of essays that you need to complete. For example, Harvard Business School has just one essay. Schools like Stanford have multiple essays, almost up to 5 to 6 paragraphs that you need to, 5 to 6 different questions that you need to answer. Schools like Wharton have a couple. So there are different number of essays that you need to fill in for each. The questions have been changing every 2 to 3 years, so it really depends upon when you apply. But usually the questions are centered around you. Your story, something that really impacted you, something that the admissions committee can understand